Ready to get started? Thank you for coming. Welcome. If you are in the room and have a cell phone, if you could silence it, would be greatly appreciated. People that are on Zoom, you are muted. Please stay muted. If you have a question for the speaker, put it in the chat, and I will monitor that after his presentation. I have someone here who wants to make an announcement for you first.
Hi, my name is Henry Logan, and I am the chair of the ILR board. And I want to thank you all so much for your participation in this extraordinary series of wonders. We've had some technical challenges this year. I think we have many of those resolved for the fall. And I wanted to let you know that September 21st, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, will be our kickoff for our fall courses. We are going to have another amazing series of lectures and participations and discussions, and it's going to be a very, very good fall season. And I wanted to hand out to you, in appreciation for your attendance, something for you to write September 21st on. A little notepad. And thank you again for your attendance. And I know many of you have been here for the entire series. Others come for the ones that they're interested in. And we appreciate so much your participation in ILR. And now I'll turn it to Roy, who will do his special gig.
Thank you. Having someone come and talk about the Matheson is special to me. I don't know how many years ago now, 30 probably. A local history museum was a gleam in the eye of Mark Barrow, Dr. Barrow. And he got a small group of us to constitute ourselves a committee to work toward a local history museum. And we met for 3 or 4 years around his dining table, and I promised myself I would never be on another board that met at night, and didn't. But in any event, along the way, Sarah Matheson, who some of you will remember, Sarah gave us her home, which is, I guess, the second oldest one within the city limits of Gainesville. And then we were looking for a place, and it just happened that the American Legion building, which backs up to her property, became available. We had tried to buy the Masonic Lodge unsuccessfully, but the membership of the American Legion had dwindled to about 6 old men who met there daily and drank and smoked. And indeed, when we acquired it, it's a really handsome 1932 building designed by the best architect in Gainesville at the time. It's aged well, but it was full of whiskey bottles and smelled of 40 years of smoke. It took quite a while to just clear it out. But Sarah was very much alive and very much part of our board and our effort for the first several years. And we actually have people in the audience here today who, as teenagers, teeny bopped or whatever people did at that time, because it was a very popular place for parties and things in Gainesville. So again, the Matheson Center, which our speaker will talk about, it now comprises 3 or 4 buildings, but it's a very, very special place to me, and having been involved so many years there. Our speaker today, Sal Cumella, is the executive director there, and he's given me a little information about himself, and it's pretty disconnected. He was born in New York, but raised in the Tampa Bay area. He received a BA in history with a minor in classical studies at the University of Florida. He then received a master's in historic preservation. He worked in nonprofit and government sectors. He's a certified planner, AICP, the American Institute of Certified Planners, through the American Planning Association. And he served as a preservation planner for the cities of Gainesville and Fernandina Beach. Hobbies include gardening. He's a master gardener. He's done research on cemetery and cemetery preservation. And of course, we have a wonderful one in Evergreen in Gainesville. He says he's always been a bit of a museum nerd, and who can blame him for that with the museums that we have at hand? As a fun fact, he won a writing award at the age of 16 and was invited to meet British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Now, I'm going to let him talk to you about noteworthy developments at the Matheson Center now and in the future. So, Sal.
Thank you, Roy. My name is Salvatore Cumella. I am the executive director at the Matheson Museum. I'm serving, we're going on 10 months now as executive director, and I'm really, really proud to be at the head of this institution. I learn something new every day. So today, what I wanted to share a little bit with you about is the Matheson family and how they're an example of how different families' histories relate to our local history and can really exemplify that. So my lecture is called Where History Lives, Alachua County History Through the Matheson Family's Story. I will say, it's going to be a very broad overview, but we do have a lot more information at the museum. If you haven't, Murray Laurie has written a fantastic book. It's no longer in print, but if you can get a copy of it, it explains the history of the Matheson family and the history of the house and all its inhabitants. And that's called Sheltering the Past by Murray D. Laurie. So if you can find one, I know the Friends of the Library book sale's coming up. It's a great book. There we go. Thank you. So one of the things I look at when I look at history, and as Roy said, my background's kind of varied. I am a historian. I have a degree in historic preservation, and also look at our work at the museum, preserving our collection. And what's important to me has always been that histories aren't just dates and events. It's the people, families, and stories they leave behind. So whenever I approached a historic preservation project, I would look at a building, and some people would say, okay, look at the architecture. It's a high style of architecture. And I would say, okay, that's great. That's one criteria. But what about the history of the building? Who built this building? Why did they build it? Who lived there? Who worked there? What changes has it seen over time? And how do those changes reflect the local and national changes that were happening at the time? Because all of that leaves its mark on our built environment. And so today I'll talk about the Matheson family, starting a little pre-Civil War, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this area has had a very long history with our Native Americans, but we are not going to get into that today. But I did want to plug one of our upcoming talks that'll be fantastic about Timucua language and culture. Dr. Broadwell will be giving that on October 1st. So if you get a chance, come out to the museum and hear that. His research is fascinating, and I think it'll be a really interesting discussion. So even, from that, 1820s era onward, we have a lot going on with the history of Alachua County. And so I'm not going to go through all of it, but when you think about a multi-generational family in in Alachua County. You think about all these different events that they've seen, that they helped shape and that shaped them. And today we still see that through their history and even the architecture. So some big ones there, in 1824, Alachua County formed. In 1860, the Fernandina to Cedar Key Railway comes through Gainesville, which was a big influence. Of course, the Civil War has an effect on our area. We'll see some fires downtown that affected the family, and then their political involvement in downtown. Yeah. There we are. So over the 19th and 20th centuries, the county shifted from a frontier settlement to a connected, growing community aided by the arrival of the railroad, the expansion of farming, and Gainesville's emergence as a commercial hub. So if you think about in that 100 years, what one family has seen, and although the Matheson family is a great example of that, there are lots of family stories that kind of follow that history and can really exemplify the history. One of those, here's a postcard from our postcard collection, looking at the Atlantic Coast train coming down Main Street. I will point out the architecture of the buildings, and if you take note of the lamppost that is in that picture, thank you. And so, of course, the railroad was a huge influence in how Gainesville and the area around it developed. This is later on in the 40s, but you can see kind of Gainesville there in the center and all the places the railroad went and how that affected its growth. Of course, talking about the Civil War, we had the Battle of Gainesville, had a major effect on the entire country, but especially in the South and some places more than others. Looking at the Matheson family, so this is hard to read as the names are kind of small, but the Matheson family are descendants from Scotland, and they came down from North Carolina. They were planters in North Carolina, related to the Hales of Hale Plantation. So there was a lot of branches of the family tree there and relations. So Catherine Hale Matheson was kind of the matriarch of the Matheson family. And then it goes down through the generations to get to our last residents of the Matheson house, which were Chris and Sarah Matheson, who we'll talk about in detail. But there are some other side stories that are quite fascinating that we won't get to talk about today. One of them was Augustus Steele. He was an editor and a publisher. He helped found Magnolia, Florida, led efforts to create Hillsborough County. He owned Etsina Adi Key in Cedar Key. He served in the state legislature and worked with David Levy-Yulee to get the railroad specifically from Cedar Key to Fernandina Beach and through Gainesville. He's notable in our family tree. For his daughter, Gussie Florida Steele, also known as Gussie, married James Douglas, or J.D. Matheson, in 1867 at age 20. They're a fascinating look at that family and their history, which we won't talk about today, but we do talk about a little on our tours at the museum. But we're very excited to announce that our upcoming exhibit in the spring of 2026 is going to be all about the Steele family, and it'll showcase some of their items from the Matheson house and talk about their history and their influence, not just locally, but on the state of Florida. So we're excited for that. So look for that in the spring. So J.D. Matheson James Douglas, and Augusta Florida Steele, were married in 1867 and moved from Camden, South Carolina to Gainesville. Remember I said they're related to the Hales, and so there was a lot of movement from this area in South Carolina, in the Camden area, to Gainesville, specifically for the growing of cotton crops, which is what they had done in South Carolina. As I said, JD was a member of the planter class, growing Sea Island cotton. He was also very active in state and local politics. He operated the Matheson and Company General Goods Store here in Gainesville, which later got a little more specific and focused on leather goods and shoes. And the two of them had 4 children, Bessie, Steele, Catherine, and Christopher. Unfortunately, Bessie and Catherine passed away in infancy, as was all too common in that time period. And Steele died in an accident at age 16. So as I said, when they first came to Gainesville, they ran the Matheson and Company store. This is a photo of it from the 1870s. It's that building on the far left. It was, of course, in that period, a wood-framed building. There was a fire in the late 1800s. It's actually multiple fires in the late 1800s. But this particular fire took out that block north of the courthouse square. So all of those buildings that you see there date to the late 1890s or later. The Matheson and Company store was rebuilt. This is what it looks like. I always love to point out the big boot hanging from the front door. That's because they, as I said, made that shift over to selling leather goods and shoes more than just general goods. What a lot of people don't know is the building still exists. A lot of the buildings from that period still exist. This is directly across from the courthouse. If you know, on the corner there is the Papa Top building. The Matheson building is what is the arcade building, that 2-story building there. So I always try to remind people, our downtown has a lot of history in it. And just because some buildings have been preserved better than others doesn't mean they're not still there. And it's fascinating to look at, especially aerials of the buildings and compare them to old Sanborn maps, which show their footprints and what they were made of. And from that, you can see that the center of this block is still the late 1800s block that was built there. So, as I said, the 4 children, 2 of whom died in infancy, unfortunately. So Chris and Steele, the only 2 males survived. Chris followed in his father's footsteps, serving as mayor for multiple terms, as a Florida legislator, helped modernize the city's infrastructure and promote education and navigate a changing social landscape. This particular photo is his law office downtown. So a little bit about Chris. He attended the East Florida Seminary and then went on to the Citadel in 1890. In 1896, he enlisted in the Army. But unfortunately, in 1897, tragedy struck when his younger brother Steele, at age 16, was killed in a hunting accident. So he returned back to Gainesville to be with his parents. He stayed in Gainesville and became certified to practice law in both Florida and South Carolina. One of the things he was noted for was lobbying to bring the University of Florida to Gainesville. So if you think about all these historic changes that were happening in this period, you know, the different family members were involved in these. He became mayor in Gainesville in 1910. He served 8 one-year terms, which is interesting because that makes him the longest serving mayor of Gainesville to this day. So he does hold that record. We've recently discovered letters from him that show a little bit about his character and about his love for the city, where he explains to people during one of his later terms that he's not campaigning for mayor because he never wanted to be mayor. The people wanted him to be mayor, and if they still want him to be mayor, they'll vote for him, and he's happy to do it, but he never wanted the position. And so I think that's kind of noble that he did it even though it wasn't the thing that he wanted to do. But he did a lot as mayor. And so in his time, he ushered in many civic improvements, including the 13 blocks of electrified street lamps, paving the brick streets that we see in some places downtown still, and the purchase of the first fire engines. So in this photo, it doesn't actually look like the streets are paved in this, but you can see the electrified street lamp. And that's notable because, as I'll show you a little bit later, there's only one surviving in the city, and it sits outside the Matheson house. So if you get a chance, please come by and see the only surviving electric street light. As Chris got older, after the death of his mother, Augusta, Chris decided to close up his law practice and moved to Oklahoma around 1919, where he served as a pastor in the Presbyterian Church. In 1933, he married Sarah Hamilton, who was a Presbyterian missionary who he met out in Oklahoma. There's Sarah and Chris. It should be noted, Chris was about 23 years older than Sarah was. And before I go on, one of the things I always love to ask people is, how many people, if anybody, well, I know multiple people, knew Sarah? Did anybody? 2, 3. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I love, is really getting to hear firsthand from people who knew her, because people knew her in different ways. She was very involved in a lot of different things. So hearing those stories is really fantastic. This is an article about the street lamp being saved. So Sarah had the foresight to have the street lamp saved and moved to their house. In the 1940s, Chris unfortunately was diagnosed with Parkinson's. He decided to retire from his ministry as a pastor in Oklahoma in 45. Chris and Sarah decided to move back home, or to Chris's home here in Gainesville, and rehab the Matheson house as their home, adding modern bathrooms and a modern kitchen. In his time away, the house had kind of fallen into disrepair, and so when they moved back in retirement, fixed the house back up to live in retirement. Sarah quickly becomes part of society here in Gainesville, and she became very active, especially with the First Presbyterian Church. Chris passed away in October of 1952. But as I said, Sarah was a good deal younger, and of course women tend to live longer than men. So Sarah decides to stay in Gainesville and continue living in the Matheson house. She becomes a civic leader in her own right, becoming involved with various groups, including Church Women United, Gainesville Friends of the Library, Friends of Music, the Founders Garden Circle, and the Alachua County Historical Society, which later becomes the Matheson Museum. Sarah traveled very often for her Presbyterian missionary work and training programs. So she was a world traveler, circled the world twice, spending 2 years in Korea teaching English. Here's a great photo of her north of Hong Kong. And we also, one of the items we have in our archive is her passport, which has a lot of stamps. Here are just some articles about all the different things that she did, from when she went to Korea to teach English, to different church functions she did. So she was very, very active throughout her later life. Upon her passing in 1994, Sarah left the Matheson house to the Matheson Museum, specifically to be used to preserve and share the Matheson family history and how that relates to the history of our community.
When did you start thinking about, in terms of donating your house and property as a museum?
Well, even from Chris's death on, I wanted the house preserved in some way. I just didn't want, because of the history of the family. From the very beginning, the Mathesons and the Steeles, his grandfather, and their part in the history, and the house, because it must have been just about Chris's death that the realtors had a luncheon. And Mrs. Ollinger was one of the ones I remember that called me to.
So that was Sarah Matheson herself. When asked about when she started thinking about turning the house into a museum and donating the house. And as she says in that clip, as realtors do, realtors were flocking for that property. And she knew that it was more important than just selling the property. The property had a long history with her husband's family and was important to the community. The house, I don't know if I said this in the beginning, the house is the third oldest house in the city, standing currently. So looking at the Matheson house then and now. So obviously it hasn't changed a ton, but it's come a long way. The Matheson house is very unique. One of the things that people notice and ask about, and we talk about when we're on tours, is the architecture of the house. It's unlike a lot of other Gainesville homes, and it is that way for a number of reasons. So the house was built as a one-story house, and sometime around the 1890s, the second floor was added. That addition you see on the right was added. But again, architecturally, it's unique. One of the standout features of it that people notice the most are the front columns that don't actually touch the front porch. The front columns actually go all the way to their foundation piers in front of the porch. And that, and a lot of the other decorative elements that come from it, are based on that South Carolina tradition. Remember, they came down from Camden. And so the other two pictures, so the upper left corner is the Matheson house itself. The other two images are two homes from Camden, and you can see they share a lot of similarities. The black and white photo is actually Alexander Matheson's home in Liberty Hill, which is just north of Camden. So the Matheson Museum. Matheson Museum today. So this is the American Legion Hall we were talking about, designed by Sanford Goyne. It was the American Legion Hall until the 1980s, when the Historical Society took it over and converted it to the museum. It's a fantastic building, still has a lot of its original elements, and we love being able to house the museum in it. If you haven't visited, please come and visit. We have a lot of exciting things going on. Our mission as the museum is to preserve and interpret the history of Gainesville, Alachua County, and the surrounding areas. So it's a kind of wide net, but we are very local, is kind of what makes us stand out and makes us different from a lot of other institutions. Just a show of hands, how many people here have ever been to the museum for any kind of event? That is fantastic. I love seeing all the hands. If you haven't, please come out. We've got lots of events, different types of events and programs, so you're sure to find something that you'll like. A little bit of history of once the museum opened. The History Museum opened to the public in 1994. Currently, we're open 11 to 4, Wednesday through Saturday. We do have our library and research archive across the street, which is available by appointment. So if you have any interest in local history topics, we can help you research that. The Matheson House is currently closed to the public for refurbishment, which I will go into a little bit more in a minute. Some of the myths about the museum, as I said, I've been here about 10 months now in this role, and I hear from a lot of people, well, you guys are part of UF or part of the county or the city, and That is not true. We're an independent nonprofit. We rely on our memberships, donations, and grants to keep our doors open. And something that's very important to our board and very important to me is that our programs and events and exhibits are free to the public. We don't feel that history, or that we feel that history should be shared with everyone. So unless it's a specific fundraising event, we try to keep all of our events free and open to the public. A little bit about the museum complex. We have 4 buildings on our site. 3 of them are historic buildings. We have the Matheson House, which was started in the 1850s, the 1932 American Legion Hall, which now serves as the museum's main building. Across the street, we have the 1933 Gainesville Gospel Tabernacle building, which serves as our library and archives. And then 2 other elements of our complex are the Tyson Tool Barn, which is it's a tool barn filled with historic tools, which we love to give tours of, if you haven't seen that. And then Sweetwater Park is also part of the Matheson complex. This is just something from the city. The city has recognized how important Sweetwater Park and the Matheson Museum are as the downtown jewel, linking all the neighborhoods that run along that linear park. So there are plans in place to really upgrade that. And as you can see, some of the ideas are to connect First Avenue to really, you'll see Bo Diddley Plaza in the very left of the screen, and to the right of the green shaded area. It almost lines up perfectly with the Matheson House. So really highlighting the park. One of the things that I have found since I've been the director is a lot of people say, oh, I don't know what the museum does, or I've heard of the museum, but I've never been in it, or I've driven past the building, but I don't know what it is. And my next question is, well, how long have you lived in Gainesville? And some people will say, all my life. And I say, that's a problem. We're going to change that. So that's definitely something that's one of my goals, is to get people aware of what we do and to get people in the door. And it's not just exhibits. We have lots of different things. Like every month on the second Saturday, we do something called Second Saturdays at Sweetwater. Sometimes it's a concert in the park. Sometimes it's a play. So there are other things to do. If you're not interested in touring our exhibits, we do have lots of other activities. We also do a lot of book signings and programs, lectures, things like that. Some highlights of the Matheson collection, in addition to the actual Matheson collection, which includes furniture from all the generations of Mathesons, and all of their ephemera. So when we inherited the house, we did get almost everything in it. But we also have over 20,000 historic Florida postcards from every county in the state. It's one of the largest Florida postcard collections, if not the largest. We have 1,500 Florida stereo view cards. We have a photograph collection called the Bone Photograph Collection. And I will say, and admit my ignorance, when I first took the job at the museum and somebody said something about our bone photograph collection, I said, why do we have photos of bones? And that is not the case. Elmer Harvey Bone was a photographer, very prolific in Gainesville from the 1920s to the 1950s. And we have his photograph collection, and it's fantastic because it's such a wide range of photographs that tell us so much about the history of our area from that time period. So we're very proud of that, and working on trying to digitize that currently. We also maintain records of local civic groups and social groups. And our library contains over 4,000 volumes of state and local history. A lot of them can't be found elsewhere. So a lot of what we do, we try not to duplicate things that are other places. So if it's a collection that the university has in their libraries, or a newspaper archive that can be accessed online, we try to not to have those things. We try to only have the things that pertain to our local area, that you really can't find other places. Yep. If you haven't been in, or even if you have been in, it's a good time to stop by. We have 2 current exhibits up right now. This year is the 200th anniversary of the founding of Alachua County. And so we're celebrating Discover 200 Alachua with our exhibit, Alachua Phenomenon, 2 Centuries in Florida's Eden. It will run now through March 2026. It's a fantastic exhibit that looks at 9 different topics that helped make Alachua County what it is and make it different than a lot of its surrounding counties. So it's a fantastic exhibit. Another exhibit that we have is called Weaving a Community, 30 Years of Matheson History, celebrating the 30th anniversary of the museum. That will run through December of 2026. And so that takes a look at not only some history of the Matheson family and who they are, but also the history of the museum and how the museum came to be. We work with a lot of partners. So one of the partners we're working with right now, which we're really excited about, is the Alachua County Remembrance Project. If you don't know their Truth and Reconciliation program, here they are with the soil jars where they've taken the soil samples from the areas where around the county where there were lynchings in honor of those lynching victims. We are in the planning phases right now of opening one of our new exhibits, which opens in January of this coming year. It's the Community Quilts exhibit, memorializing victims of racial injustice. All 8 of the quilts from all the different communities around the county will be on display in the museum. So if you get a chance, please come out and see that. Looking at some of our current issues that we're having at the museum. One of them is, I'm sure you're all aware of federal and state funding for arts and culture grants. The museum has felt the brunt of that. And we have lost our federal and state funding in a number of ways because the organizations that money comes down through no longer exist. So that's been something. One of our big projects this year, as I said, the Matheson House had to be closed for some structural issues that we need to address. We were applying for the state historic preservation grants, which have historically always been around to help with these type of historic preservation projects. They actually are what helped the museum become the museum and be converted to the museum. And earlier this year, we found out that that is not being funded this year. So we shifted gears and we are applying for a less amount, but for state money and trying to raise some funds for the Matheson House. We would really like to get it reopened to the public and be able to give tours of the house again. Some opportunities we've got, as I said, we are working with the city of Gainesville. They have a small pot of money right now, so we are working with them to try to get that grant and piggyback off that grant for the rehab of the house. We're very proud of our corporate sponsor program. We have instituted a new corporate sponsor program, and so we have 10 corporations, local businesses that are supporting us, but we're always looking for more. So if anybody knows any businesses that want to support the museum, we would be happy to have their support. Other initiatives we have going on are planned giving or estate planning. It's a great way to think about giving in the future and really helping with long-term stability at the museum and planning individuals' legacies. The other thing is sustainer memberships. I encourage everybody to become a member. We have many membership levels that'll fit lots of different people. Membership is one of the ways that we keep the doors open and again, keep the programs free. So if anybody's interested in that, they can be happy to answer any questions, or you can go online to mathesonmuseum.org. So in kind of wrapping up, really looking at the Matheson family is just one thread in the tapestry of Alachua County's history, but it's a vivid, enduring one. But there are many, many out there. And so really knowing those histories and those stories is important to understand where we've come from, to understand where we might go. And with that, I'll take any questions anybody has, but here on the screen is, thank you. If anybody has any questions, my email and contact is available. Like I said, this kind of just skimmed the surface of lots of different topics, but we have a lot more information at the museum. If anybody wants to come, we'll be happy to give you private tours. So please stop on by the museum. Thank you.
Questions? Okay, here I come. Behind you.
Hi, I'm from Miami, and Matheson was a big name there, Matheson Hammock, and going back to Miami history. And I always was curious if there's a relationship.
We get that question almost every day. So there's not a direct, quick relationship, but being Mathesons, somewhere from Scotland, I'm sure they're actually related, but it's not a very quick, direct relation. But I would say yes, if you can dig far enough back, I think all the Mathesons would end up coming from Scotland and being part of the same Matheson clan. Melanie.
Hi. Do you have any idea why he chose to go to Oklahoma from Gainesville?
So it was after his mother passed. I think on a personal level, he wanted to start a new life. But it was really the church. It was an opportunity with the Presbyterian Church to be the pastor out there and do that. So that's what I think led him specifically to Oklahoma.
Because Oklahoma's so remote.
It is.
Gainesville.
Yeah, I think it was
Especially back
he
then.
had a very specific opportunity there, and I think that's what led him out there.
Sal, can you give a quick overview of the highlights of the collections? And are you currently taking any contributions to the collections if people have things they think that might be of value, or is that on hold?
So we've actually lifted the hold. We did temporarily have a hold. We've been working through a backlog of collections, and we've been refining our collections policy for what we take in. So we do have a wide range of items in our collection. We are always interested if you have any family history or artifacts or anything that you think could further the story of our community. Definitely give us a call. We'll definitely take a look at it, whether it be through photos. Our process for it is we have a collections committee, and our collections committee looks at the items to determine whether they fit into our mission or not. And so that's how we determine whether we actually accession something into the collection or not. We're very cognizant right now, especially with financial climate, that every item we take in, we have to care for in perpetuity. So it's not just like we put it on a shelf. We actually have to, make sure that they exist for long periods of time. So.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you again, everybody. Let's thank him again.
Thank you all.